Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, June 3rd, 2016. The WNW 240 top story is all about Trump. And I'm going to categorize this week as the beat up on Donald Trump week. He's having problems with his Trump University. Fair story to do. There's a legitimate lawsuit there. Fair to report on that story. And here's the way USA Today not only did that report on that, but they had a team of people to do this, what I call a hit piece on Donald Trump. The reason why I call it a hit piece, because you'd never see anything like this on Hillary Clinton. Oh, you would not see this. And then if you'd look here close, let me get in here close and you get it to focus up and come back. Then you say that it's a exclusive USA Today analysis finds 3,500 lawsuits unprecedented for a presidential nominee. Well, isn't it unprecedented for a presidential nominee to be under an active FBI criminal investigation? Isn't that unprecedented? Do you think they would put teams of people on Hillary Clinton to do a story about her active investigation? There's so many things they didn't cover in USA Today. And incidentally, they went back 3 decades. They went back 3 decades. And what they buried was, when you got a lot of money, people are going to try to sue you to get some of it, I would suspect. And Trump won overwhelmingly most of the lawsuits. He just won a Supreme Court case. Overwhelmingly won the lawsuits. And this is a multi-billionaire with businesses and hotels and golf courses and resorts on, 3, 4, 5 continents. It's unbelievable. And what I'm saying is it's okay to do this kind of a story, but is it the unprecedented story of a Democratic frontrunner being under an FBI investigation for obviously security leaks and multiple lies about her refuted by the Inspector General's report that Hillary Clinton said about her server and how she had it and she had permission? That was the only story that I know of. Above the fold, top story, the only story I know with the rest of the mainstream media, including USA Today, the only story I know of that they actually put front and center the Inspector General report that said Hillary broke the rules. She didn't have permission. She broke the rules on that. So I had a private server. What the Democrats want to say is, well, Colin Powell didn't have a private server in his bathroom. Do you think they would put teams of people to cover the Judicial Watch depositions of Cheryl Mills to go over that, her chief of staff, or Huma Abedin, also Judicial Watch, or the guy who set up the server, who at the Judicial Watch lawsuit to get to the bottom of her email scandal, pled the fifth? Do you think they'd have any of that stuff? Do you think maybe they should put teams of people on that? How about the story where Charles Artel, who's a writer, writes for one of the big newspapers, also is an investor, an analyst, Wall Street professional. He claims that the Clinton Foundation is a charity fraud. Do you see anybody shout him down over that? That's his research. He says that it's the biggest or one of the biggest charity frauds in history. The Clinton Foundation. Anybody rolling out teams of people? I mean, after all, they did a book called Clinton Cash. There was a big book out. There's going to be a movie out called, I think his name is Schweitzer, who has a big movie coming out, Clinton Cash, the movie. It plays off the book, and it's about what she did as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, what she did as Secretary of State. And you got to get to the reason why she had a private server, not I don't want to carry that many devices or whatever. That ridiculous, idea that the reason why she had it. Well, now she just says, well, I made a mistake. Well, no, she didn't. And again, why? What was the motivation for her to break the rules in this manner? And listen, this is what I think, and this is what the Clinton Cash book said, and this is what a lot of the other evidence says, is that she was basically selling favors as Secretary of State for donations to the Clinton Foundation, or they book former President Clinton, and then lo and behold, they get a big donation to the Clinton Foundation. Charles Ortel thinks it's money laundering and worse, and wire fraud and all kinds of different frauds. But listen, do you think? And that's not my point. My point is, do you think the press would put teams of people in an exhaustive investigation on a story that has never happened in the history of presidential politics? as to why she had a private server and why that, Guccifer said, oh, it's easy to hack. That was a Romanian hacker that they extradited over to the United States who's going to help the FBI with their investigation. What was the motivation? Was it to sell favors? Do you think they put teams of people on that? No, they would not put teams of people on that. And listen, as I said, the USA Today, I'm using that because it's the nation's news. It's 4.3 million subscribers to that left-wing thought-shaping rag as far as I'm concerned, because it's not reporting. When you report, you have to be fair. You trash Donald Trump, you give equal time to trash the Democratic person. And there's plenty on Hillary Clinton, and there's plenty on Donald Trump, but the Trump University and his lawsuits pales in comparison. It makes, as I've said before, it makes what Richard Nixon did look like a 8-year-old sneaking into his sister's room, stealing her Girl Scout cookie money. But you gotta be fair. You praise one, you praise the other, you bring up bad points, good. You be fair. That's the basis of objective reporting. A lot of people say, well, you're just for Donald Trump. No, it sickens me to see the completely total, rabid, unobjective reporting in hit pieces on Donald Trump. That makes me sick. Them doing a story on his university, fair game. But don't you think the Clinton Foundation, that's being alleged as the biggest charity fraud in history, and the national security events around that with the private email server, unprotected, nobody having any kind of a class, isn't that a story that they should put just a few reporters on to report weekly? Come on. That's what I'm talking about as a reporter. And yet, when they do say something, they know that this is a big story, but they have to identify it's a big story. So here's what they did. Here's where they put it in the back of the newspaper. Report shows Clinton ignored warnings in email security. Yeah, really? It just ignored the warnings. The report says it ignored the warnings. And don't you think the newspaper in a news meeting would sit around and say, somebody would come up and pop up and say, hey, why did she have that private server anyway? Maybe to cover up that she was influencing, peddling, and selling favors as her job as Secretary of State. And here's another big one. And this is a huge story that should at least got a little coverage somewhere. Doug Shum, former President Bill Clinton, pollster and advisor, okay? He writes a front-page op-ed piece on the Wall Street Journal. And mind you, this is Doug Shum, former Clinton advisor. He still works for the Democrats. He's also a contributor on Fox News. As a Democrat, he's a big-time Democrat. He talks to big-time Democrats all the time. Do you think that he just went off the reservations on his own for a Wall Street Journal op-ed saying Clinton might not be nominee? Isn't that a big story? That's the exact headline from the Wall Street Journal, Doug Shum. The funny thing about it is that nobody booked him for this, except Sean Hannity booked him for this. And what did he bring up? Well, we're worried about California. Well, what did I tell you? She better win by a landslide. We're worried about this email server thing. Well, at the very least, Comey's going to dump a big bag of trash on her head and say, here are all the things that she did wrong. And if Loretta Lynch doesn't indict her, then here's my resignation, or, poo-poo on her or whatever. And I think that they want to run Biden. And that is what Doug Shum brought up. Doug Shum, this guy right here, brings up the fact, well, we might want to run Biden because they sure don't want to run Bernie Sanders. And boy, you talk about a ruckus. You talk about conflict inside somebody's party. They marched Joe Biden out and Elizabeth Warren as his VP, and they bypassed Bernie Sanders, who has just about half of the Democratic votes. He's only short a million or two. California, he may be short a lot less. And, of course, Hillary Clinton has the whole system rigged. Well, not Hillary, but the Democrats have the whole system rigged where Hillary Clinton gets all these super delegates, criminal cronies. Do you think that Doug Shum, former Clinton advisor and pollster, is going to come out and pop this idea out? Clinton might not be nominee, to float that little idea out there in the national press, in the Wall Street Journal, and the people that pay him, the Democrats, don't know he's doing that? You think he did that on his own? Yeah. No. I want to talk about the economy. And the economy, listen, economic cycles precede political cycles, and we got a terrible political cycle coming up because the economy's doing bad. When everybody's fat and happy, politics are pretty good, and you're talking about stuff that's not all really that important. But when the economy is bad, you're talking about people, starving in the street, like in Venezuela, where they're chanting, "We want food," and they're tear gassing them. Meanwhile, they're also eating, the cats and dogs and pets and all that's leaving the streets in Venezuela. And I talked to Gregory Mannarino. He says, scares me because I think that's coming here. I think that in some form that is coming here. Now, Mannarino says that this is going to be a global event, and I think he's right because the debt rot is globally. It's not just a country or two. It's not just Venezuela, or it's not just Argentina, or it's not just Brazil or Romania, or it's just one. It's the entire debt market is kiboshed, including, could you imagine 3 or 4 years ago saying, wow, that Puerto Rican debt's going to be no good. They can't pay the interest. And here we have, and what happens when you can't pay the interest? You default on the debt. So here we have another headline. This just came out, and this is a UBS strategist. Okay? This guy is Matthew Mish. Here's the headline. A tsunami is about to overwhelm the debt market. Yeah, that's the tsunami of default. The defaults, according to him, have just about doubled. And they don't have to double by they doubled about 100% more. I think it went from 2-point-something% to 4.6 or 7%, nearly double. But, the margins are so thin, there's the amount of money at the banks, the capital is so thin, the debt is so huge, you don't need a huge amount of the debt to default to crash your capital. But this headline came out just, tsunami is about to overwhelm the debt market. And Mannarino says, watch the debt market. Watch the debt market. So here's another one that comes up. PIMCO warns material risk globally of monetary policy exhaustion. Well, they've got 0% interest rates. They got quantitative easing, debt, and they're leveraging up in some, emerging markets like China and European periphery. That's what the article says. But PIMCO is warning about risk globally of monetary policy exhaustion. In other words, they won't be able to make the payments. We won't be able to issue any more debt. Now, this goes right along with Bill Gross. And the reason why I bring this up is because, I'll tell you in just a minute. Bill Gross, I told you this last week, the system itself is at risk. These are all bond people, folks. PIMCO is the biggest bond fund, or one of the biggest bond funds in the world. Bill Gross used to run PIMCO. He's now at Janus. He's worrying about the system itself is at risk, and shorts credit as day of reckoning is coming. And so Mannarino calls me and says, you know what, dude? I think I know what those bond people see. I said, what's that, Greg? He goes, the flattening of the yield curve. And so here we go. Here it is in 2014. Okay, look at the picture here. Okay, so here's 2014. See how it's kind of healthy going up, and here is now. You see how the curve is flattening? Well, this may not mean a lot to you and me in terms of being a financial junkie, but it means a lot in terms of investing, and this is exactly the pattern right here that's set up, the yield curve flattening. In other words, near-term debt is the same price as long-term debt, the yield curve flattening, and that's the exact same thing, the exact same pattern that's set up in 2001, just before the crash, 2008, just before the crash. Same thing. And Mannarino tells me, he says, the Fed, they're supposed to raise interest rates, and, see, they're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. If they do, they could cause a crash. You see what happened with the last interest rate rise in December. 2 weeks later, we had the worst open of the stock market ever. They raise rates, and they raise, people are not going to want to hold the bonds. They're going to sell. They're going to sell stocks, bonds. That's what Mannarino, he says, if they don't raise rates, then basically what the Fed is admitting is that, we still need emergency monetary policy. That's what the Fed calls it. We are still, after 80, 90 months, still in emergency monetary policy. Still in emergency policy. Jeff Gundlach, he runs $100 billion fund. He said he's right about the short squeeze, warns of massive anxiety about the market. You think that anxiety is about default? You think that if bonds start defaulting, you think the stocks might start going down too? You think if everybody starts getting out of the stock market and piling into the bond market, that might trap a lot of people in there too, and that could sell off? Anxiety. Let's see, what could cause that anxiety? I don't know. How about General Motors sales being off 18%? How about General Motors sales being, Ford's off a little more than 6%, General Motors off 18%. Now, they're still going to sell, 17 million cars this year, but you can only pull demand forward so much. Here's another little anxiety. Here we go. Construction spending collapses. Worst April since 2009. Wow, we're at it. U.S. manufacturing, weakest since 2009. That's the bottom of the last crash. No comfort for those looking for a rebound. What have I been telling you? There is no recovery. Not on Main Street. Wall Street, sure. Not on Main Street. So what are people doing? They're selling. What have I been telling you? That this is according to a B of A research note, Bank of America. And here is, the B of A. This is what their quote is from Bank of America. Clients still don't believe the rally. Smart money sells stocks for a record 18th consecutive week. They don't believe the rally. Smart money's sell, sell, sell. That's what's going on in the economy. And then if you just shift over to the South China Sea, something that you should be paying attention to, they're setting up an air defense type perimeter, for the provocation of the United States. What's going on in China? Their economy's going terrible. Maybe they need a war to cover up the crashing economy, the terrible economy. But I had Charles Denner on about 16, 18 months ago, and he said, I think the South China Sea has got a big problem. And why do I say that? Because, aerospace stocks in China and Japan and around the region all shot up. And what is China doing? They're setting up an air defense perimeter in the South China Sea, for the provocation of the United States. Nenner thinks that's the hottest of hot spots in the world. Middle East, not so much, at least right now. But the South China Sea, horrible. Charles Denner is going to be the early Sunday release coming up this weekend, and you won't want to miss it. He has some unusual predictions. I will say this: everybody I talk to, not a single person says that, we won't have a crash. No. Not a single person says that. Every person says, yeah, we're due. We're going to have a crash. And just look at Bill Gross or Jeff Gundlach or these other people that they're all bracing themselves for a crash. They're probably freaking out about where they're going to, hold cash and how they're going to protect themselves and their clients, and so they don't look dumb. And listen, they don't come out and say this stuff just for the heck of it. If they don't say anything and they zip it and it happens, people go, did you know about that? Well, yeah, I didn't want to say anything about it. Or if they tell everybody that everything's fine and it crashes, but they look crazy, right? So they gotta come out and protect their integrity. They have to protect their reputations as money managers. If you say, well, I didn't see that coming, then give me my money, then you're an idiot. So all these guys, Bill Gross, Gundlach, PIMCO, all these people are warning about upcoming problems, and they have to warn, because if they say, woo, they can't be like the press, woo, nobody saw that coming, well, then you're stupid. You shouldn't be handling other people's money. So that's just kind of how I see the world, and kind of how I see the reporting, which I think is unfair. Listen, Trump can take his licks. If he has his Trump University and he gets dinged with this, I think the judge should recuse himself. He's with a group, La Raza, that is ardently pro illegal immigration. But I digress. Listen, folks, thank you for supporting USA Watchdog. Thank you for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments and donations. That helps us out. My favorite part, fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, and above all, spiritually. Fear not. God the Father is in charge.